talk to me about that. Like, do you have a process for color selection, or is this just kind of your artistic eye? I mean, I've seen you get a piece of art or a piece of fabric, or you'll be inspired by something. I'm having a hard time calling something to mind. Like, how do you go about picking these crazy colors that maybe wouldn't necessarily go together on the color wheel, but then when you see them, they're really, really good. Like I'm thinking of the sugar skull wrap as being an example. Some of these like really vibrant pinks and blues and purples and chartreuses and greens, and then you really, I think you do such a good job with black and white and contrast, and sort of just a little bit of separation or contrast can make colors and the shading and everything else pop. It's shocking what one thread in the right place can do. Like, is that just trial and error, or are you setting about to do that, or how do you put these colors together and get that eye for contrast?
So initially, a lot of that was trial and error, trying to figure
Okay.
out because most where I get all my color inspirations, I will, like you said, I'll find like a pair of leggings that has this crazy
Okay.
design on it, a men's
Yep.
tie.
Yep.
Nature has great stuff, but I
Mm-hmm.
also get on
Yeah, I'm a fan of
Google.
that nature stuff.
It looks like the wood
Mother
duck.
Nature, she's doing good work.
She does great work, and nothing, clashes. Everything
Right.
looks but I'll get on Google Images and I'll type in color
Mm-hmm.
palettes or color schemes.
Mm-hmm.
And if a customer's like, I want something with blue, but I don't really care what the other colors are, I'll go find the most challenging ones and go, here's ABC, which one of these do you like the best? And they'll
Interesting.
and I always challenge myself. Like, I mean, granted,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you could do blue, white, gray, blue, and do the basics and it's gonna look good. But I always like to do the ones that you wouldn't think to put together because it's
Mm-hmm.
more of a challenge to balance those colors.
Right.
The other thing is when I'm doing
I'm
my
realizing now, between the cutting them off, between picking the hard colors, you're just a sadist. You're basically a glutton for punishment. You like to punish Mary. That's what this is all about.
it really is. It really is a little bit of punishment. It's always like you can
I'm
do better.
adding you marrying West to that pile. You married your stalker. That's punishment. Like, that can't be an easy road. You just like the hard way, I guess.
Everything's the hard way with me.
That's right. That's right.
But when it comes to like figuring out where to put those colors and the patterns, it's all about contrast. Like if
Yeah.
you have to make sure, like with the sugar skulls, all I always put my colors into hot colors,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
category and cool color categories, and
Right.
then figure out which one of those two is going to make the most oomph or pop against each other, and you just
Mm-hmm.
shoot in that direction. Um,
Interesting.
but it's all and when you're picking your patterns, you always have your pattern. Your pattern
Mm-hmm.
typically is what you want to stand out the most. So
Right.
if you've got a really bright color, you're going to put it into the pattern, and then the other colors are going to come behind it so that it makes it stand out. But I always tell people, they're always like, well, how do you work black and white into it? And I'm like, they're neutrals. Black
Yeah.
and white goes with everything. So if
Right.
you're doing I do a lot of the rainbow, like pumping as many colors in as I can. If
And
I
that's the perfect way to describe it. Yeah.
I just am always trying to get like the sugar skulls themselves. Every single one of those had somewhere between 15 to 18 different colors in them.
Mm.
And I did a wrap, Kaleidoscope sometime last year. It had
Mm-hmm.
21. And, and that's just me just being crazy. That's the Alice side. That's where the nickname came from for Alice. But I black and white or contrast. If I'm doing a rainbow, I'm going to push that into the background and make the
Yeah.
pattern black and white so it stands out against everything.
Yeah, well, you do it really well, and you clearly have a good eye for it. And thank you for that, because I learn a lot looking at your wraps, right? And I think your mastery of shading, your mastery of content, contrast, and your mastery of proportion. And I know that sounds simple, but with this pattern, you're deciding how big to make the pattern on the blank. And I've occasionally seen people do incredible work when they're working with an 1.5 inch diameter jig stick, but then you give them a fine diameter blank and they're lost, right? And
Yeah.
there's some sort of like rote memorization there. One of the things I observe in your work is I feel like you're able to sort of keep that proportion and that scale and move it around in length and diameter of blanks and stuff like that. Is that all in the layout, or are you is that design element kind of from your artistic eye too, or what would you attribute that to?
Well, being able to take, so the Sugar Skull series again, those were three completely different size rods. One
Mm-hmm.
was almost a 20, the other one was a 15, and then another one was smaller than that. I think it was like 10 or 11.
Yeah, it was a
And
little, right.
they all had to have the same pattern because they were all sugar skulls. So I had to
Right.
do math to sort this through
Mm-hmm.
because one of them the reason why the sugar skull was born is that blank was bigger than the pattern could give me spacing for at that time.
Interesting.
And I just randomly threw in a diamond as the secondary pattern. And I went, oh, okay, that's how you can do that, you know? And that's when I started putting like patterns together and started all these double patterns to come up with these patterns on the sides and stuff. But taking
Okay,
it,
well, you beat me to that too. I was going to ask you about that because I feel like I wasn't even really that aware of the side pattern, main pattern. To me, these wraps were all just kind of main pattern
mhm.
until and I'm sure other people have done it too. When I first sort of paid attention, was like, oh, interesting. We're worried about the side pattern now. That was sort of an outgrowth of the size of that blank, huh?
Yep,
It's
completely.
interesting.
But taking like the Elsa has the same, she's got the impossible star on her, and I've done that one 2 other times. This one, I didn't think it was going to work because it was only 4 passes, which means that there's only 4 threads in some of the
Tiny.
actual pattern lines. It's
Right.
tiny. It's not
Yeah.
something you should technically put on an 8mm blank. But I had this vision. I was like, it
Right.
looks like the snowstorm. Like I've got to do it. And
Right.
I going into it, I thought I'm going to cut this thing off, but it worked. But that one was literally a packing nightmare. I highly don't recommend it because every
Yeah.
pack.
I'm listening to you talk a little bit. I'm like, you're not necessarily making a big case for making me want to try these things. If they're hard for you and you're saying they're a nightmare, I'm like, I'm staying away.
The impossible star on an 8mm blank is a nightmare. I don't recommend it. You put it on a 15 or a 16 diameter, it's fine.
Totally
You're gonna
manageable.
be
Yeah.
good. That's manageable. But
Yeah.
shrinking patterns down to smaller blanks is absolutely super hard. And a lot of
Right.
times I tell people pick the simpler patterns. Don't go crazy. Don't
Right.
do what I do.
Yeah.
Do a snowflake, do a spider, do a simple sparkler. It's all going to look really good when you stick to just having that one focus.